Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm joined by one of the greatest authors on Substack, Dave, man behind the screen. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. The
Mm,
zombie is pacing back and forth on my desk, demanding I pet her,
the cat.
mewing as I do, chewing on the tassels of my leather bound journal. Please stop.
The
Mhm.
kitty's got to learn.
Oh, she's too old for that.
Not well. It's kind of like trying to teach my dog not to chase cars. That ship's
But
sailed.
distinctly less dangerous.
Yeah. Although in his case, we try to rein him back, and he just always has
Yeah.
to explore everything and try to charge every car. It's
Oh,
bad
yeah.
when it's been bad this week because a lot of people from out of town come in
hmm
this time of year for
Summer vacationers and stuff. Yeah.
yeah. But the thing is, we walk through the trailer park because it's next to the forest. But the thing is, they've got cars everywhere. They've got all their pit bulls everywhere,
hmm
uh, and these things aren't. They've done nothing to try to train them to comport themselves.
Yeah.
So these pit bulls are basically just trying to bite or snap or growl at everyone.
Yeah.
Uh,
They're training them more. I mean, they're instilling the behaviors of guard dogs, attack dogs, or just generally speaking, not instilling proper canine
well,
behavior in them at all,
but they
which,
and then they bring
sad,
them to a children's baseball game
yeah,
where there's a thousand people all
yeah.
pressed together, and it's like,
And it's like
oh boy, this is just a nightmare just waiting to happen. This is a lawsuit
my
waiting to
uh,
happen.
my wife and I like pit bulls, like American pit bulls particularly. Because she used to have one. Um, I mean, technically it was her dad's dog, but uh, passed
Good
away.
guard dogs.
Yeah, well, he was super sweet. Like if you pit bulls are they're a breed that are very accepting of training and human interaction. How they are raised has and like how you treat them, how you interact with them through their life has a massive effect on how hostile or friendly they turn out being, which is, I mean, true of most dog breeds, but they get a lot of blame as if they're the fault for, all the bites and the infamous like pit bull attacks and stuff. It's like, well, no, they are a product of what they were taught. That,
Yeah,
but yeah, and the
and
same is really true. The other big breed for that, at least that we hear about out here or used to hear about all the time, was Rottweilers. Crossbreed of a pit bull and a Doberman, but it's the same thing. They have that same uh, proclivity to being very. I mean, they will behave how you teach them to behave. So
and
it's like,
these
and if you don't teach them to behave at all, they're going to behave poorly.
yeah, and well, it's also a nightmare because we've got suddenly all this trash all over the ground, and our
Oh yeah.
dog likes to eat everything that's plastic, and
Oh yeah.
and you got all that, and you got people driving 80 in a 40 zone.
Yep.
So yeah, it's been a
People
nightmare.
people not really people coming in and not respecting the place that they're guests in.
Yeah, and it's so bad. My neighbors who love to walk around all the time, like at all times during the day, have all locked themselves up in the house, like in their houses. Like everyone in the village has basically locked
Yep.
themselves behind their doors. And like, yeah, it's just these are a lot of these people will just go out in nature and like you run into I always run into like 15, 20 people on the walk
hmm
from the local village. We've not seen any of them in days.
Yeah.
But we know they're there because we occasionally see the doors open or the people running around them racing right back into their houses. Um,
They just
it's
don't want
just,
to deal with the hassle.
yeah, and yeah, but you also see the difference in culture to an extent between
hmm
the people from Toronto, from the South, and the local people. The local people are slightly more fluent in French and also from what I can tell from the local, well, from 2 years of living here, are of Celtic descent, while the
Well,
Torontonians are more Anglo-Saxon. So,
yeah, and you guys are also kind of small town living at
yeah,
the moment, aren't you?
yeah, this is a village of
Yeah,
3,000
that
people.
that makes a massive difference. Being that I did small town, I've done both the big, done the inner city thing, the suburbia thing, and the small town thing. I mean, I've been exposed to the differences in all of those too, and so
Yeah, the
there,
village.
there's yeah, it's pretty stark.
Yeah, and village people generally resent when the big city people come in and flood in. Um,
You
like,
know, it's
but
it's funny. It's the little town I lived in when I was younger. Um, which I mean, I only lived there for 6 years, but like we, my family would visit there all the time. We had a second home up there. Um, it was a tourist town, really. Like tourists,
ooh,
cabins. People like would mostly like go vacation there in the summer, vacation there in the winter. Stop it!
that
Stop
cat.
eating my bookmarks. It was like so people would go vacation in the summer, vacation in the winter mostly. So
Hmm.
it was tourism was what made the town. So we always expected people coming up and stuff. But even in a situation like that, where you got like the small tourist town of about, in our case at the time, 2,000 people, it's double that size now. Um, but yeah, small town, small village kind of thing. Like for the most part, you didn't get many of those problems, but every now and then you did. And nobody who lived up there, even knowing like, yeah, this is a tourist town, this is how we get our income, still don't like dealing with that. Still don't have the patience for that. Uh,
This is a retirement village of sorts,
oh,
um,
that's yeah.
where the elderly retire to, or you have young
Mhm.
families that come here. Um,
That's very
but
similar to how Idlewild was.
yeah, and the thing is, though, there's a there's a there's a car and then baseball festival, all which are tight, which are culturally melded together. Like it's a
Hmm.
baseball car parade and festival in this town, but it's been getting more and more popular with every year with Southerners, and they bring their trash, their poorly trained dogs, and um, just generally like the thing is, what I like about the trailer park area is that I walk through there. It's always very natural. You've got the occasional dog who will hop from the reserve that walks by, or it's generally quiet and peaceful. But this time of year, it's flooded with people, and it feels like like a suburb of Toronto.
Yeah.
And I hate Toronto. Like I actually genuinely hate it and hate most of the people from there. And um, the problem is just, culturally we've grown so far apart from each other, Canada and Toronto, that like I have a lot of friends who say, yes, we're Canadian, but we're not like those people. And you
Hmm.
have Torontonians who, on the other hand, dislike, especially, well, they dislike a lot of us because, they're like, no, we are part of Canada. And, you country hicks need to get around to it. But it's like they're foreign tourists coming in. That's how it
Yeah.
feels to a lot of us Northerners. And they also have more American weather. And the that's the one difference. Like we have very cold winters, like -30 to -40, and we're
Hmm.
kind of proud of it up here in the north. We're proud of it. We can handle the cold. We love it. But Toronto will complain if it gets to below -20. So there's that cultural clash. And um, what's weird is that when Quebecois come into the town, like just by the dozens or hundreds, there's not the same cultural clash. There's actually an affection for those travelers, and generally things go better. Like when they come over by the hundreds, it's just the Torontonians and the South Ontarians that seem to have there's friction that happens. But we also, like, during this festival, occasionally get some Americans who aren't the best behaved Americans as well. So I can't just chalk it all up to Toronto. So
Yeah.
it's like this amalgamation of just Anglophones pouring in, and we have to babysit them, and we have to basically clean up the trash. Because, and I guess what really breaks my heart is just like it's very beautiful fields by the trailer park, very beautiful, and it's littered completely and utterly in garbage. It's like it's almost looking like an Indian suburb, and it's like, oh frick, we're gonna have to clean this up after, because we can't just leave it like this because the dogs are gonna choke on everything. And yeah, but we've also been near Dan and I when we went on our walk there, nearly got hit by cars about 4 to 6 times. So it feels like Toronto, but I shouldn't spend all my time bitching about it. But we were talking backstage about how one thing I want to do. Well, one reason why I kind of want to finish a lot of my English projects is to get back to a lot of my French ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been reading more French literature because it's just, I don't know, I just feel like it. And the thing is that linguistically and culturally, it's very different from a lot of English and a lot of American literature, for example. So, like, this is something which I will praise Mark Twain for when he wrote Jeanne d'Arc. He did capture a certain essence of the French spirit. And the thing is that even Howard kind of had a bit of a sort of portion of this element, but it was more from an Irish angle. But having looked up the ethnical map of France, France is closer related to Ireland than it is to, let's say, Germany ethnically. So that's a bit interesting. And the thing is, the literature, you read Dumas, you read other authors of the 19th century, it's very much infused with a traditional monarchical element. And at least when I read French literature, I find that the good literature is always monarchical. The bad literature is always Republican, as we put it. Républicain, that is to say, pro-democracy, pro-Republican. And this chasm is only growing wider. And it used to be I really did like Hugo, but I've been finding in recent months I bristle at him. I don't like him as much as I used to. And Hunchback of Notre Dame is a case in point. It is pretty anti-monarchical in a lot of ways. And, you know, you've got the one bishop who helps burn down a part of Paris. He wants Esmeralda. Now, in the book, the captain of the guards is actually a vile person. He violates Esmeralda and also leads her on and then just loses interest in her. And Quasimodo, of course, dies by her side. She never even considered Quasimodo.
Yeah.
And in the book, it's very much, it's not like, it also does not put up a good portrait of Louis XI. Louis XI, or Louis the Spider King, was one of the best kings of France. Yeah, he was physically. Now, here's the interesting thing: he was physically ugly, like Quasimodo, but he was a great warrior. He was a great he was actually very good at economics. He was very clever, very witty, and he built on the victories of Jeanne d'Arc. Because his father was the failed king whom Jeanne fought for. But his dad was a really bad king whom, if it cost $50 to buy something, his dad would find a way to pay like 100 million for it. You know what I mean? Like, his dad was just an incompetent buffoon who even tried to assassinate his own son time and again. He hated his own son. We don't really know the reason why, but the son had to rebel against the father a few times and had to run away from the kingdom several times because starting from when he was a young man, his dad kept trying to murder him. And it's just one of those things where it's like, wow, you are a monster. And he is one of the most vile kings in French history, Charles VII. But then Louis is one of these great kings. Like when you look at him, you wouldn't expect a great king, especially with his background. But he champions France. But to portray him as a bad king is kind of, how do I put it, deconstructive and subversive.
Mhm.
And I'm realizing Hugo is a little subversive in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater sort of thing, where it's like
Yeah.
there's more story than what's being told, and it's being told in a certain way to paint things in a certain light.
Yeah. Now, this doesn't mean that he's a bad writer. No, no, no. He's a good writer. And I do like some of his writing. It's just like I really like Jean Valjean. I really like him as a character. So much that he inspired one of my characters in Chute d'Innocence. So like, like Jean Valjean is this like larger than life character. And honestly, a character who embodies redemption in such a beautiful, magnificent way. So, like, I'm not coming at this as someone who hates Hugo. I'm a fan. I'm just noticing there's some stuff that you don't notice as a kid. Then you're as a grown man, you're noticing more and more. But I'm getting to like more Dumas and Maquet, who were very, very clearly monarchists, and they're like each of their characters are basically these giga chads. You know what I mean? Like they just swagger onto the scene and just kill their enemies and just cheerfully laugh and in some cases go down to the brothels. Like they just don't care. It's culturally so different from today.
Yeah.
And we have to bear in mind Dumas and Maquet, like writing has never been something that gets you millions typically. But Dumas and Maquet made millions respectively off their writing. So like they both died very wealthy men. So like they must have done something right. And they're still well remembered today. Not that financial success or even notoriety is any testament of a great writer. It's just like they were evidently very popular. But France of the 1840s and 50s was a very different country than it is today. She was still reeling from the revolutions that had destroyed her and that had been kind of forced on her by Lafayette and Robespierre and the others. This is often something people forget. France did not want a revolution. Most of the country resisted the Jacobites. But when you have a mercenary and, like when you have various armies marching through France from like every country around her and mercenaries coming in and, like then the Jacobites have their own loyalist army. It's like, what can the people do?
Yep.
And one has to bear in mind the people were basically abandoned by like all their allies. So you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's
kind of funny in that sense too. That is one way in which the history of America kind of parallels the history of France. Like the way our history is taught to us, particularly in regards to the Revolutionary War, it paints this image like, all of the colonies were ready to came together and were ready to stand up and fight against, oppressive taxation from the king. But it's no, that really wasn't it. It was a very, very small group of people among the colonists that stood up, and it wasn't even the taxation that pushed them. It was the gun grabbing they did alongside the taxation. And because they were coming out and they were coming out and basically the redcoats were coming out and basically saying like, and the governors were saying, oh, well, we don't like the fact that you have these cannon on your lands. Well, we don't like the fact that you have these models of muskets.
Yeah.
All these sorts of things. And while the colonists are like, we literally need these to survive. We have hostile forces that are like that encroach on us regularly. We have hostile wildlife that encroaches on us regularly, and you are trying to take away something from us that's necessary for our survival.
Now, here's an interesting fun fact: how the history of Canada is formed is that you then have after like during the Revolutionary War, how we're
Mhm.
taught is the founding fathers then kind of get drunk on the success and decide, let's go up to Quebec and wipe out those frogs. It's about time. We wanted to wipe
Mhm.
them out in the 7 Years' War. Britain didn't allow us as part of the treaty between Britain and France. Britain said no wiping out the French. We have to actually tolerate them. Let's go do it. Let's finish the job. And you have a group of loyalists who were chased out and pushed out into Ontario, and they form like a wall. America does not manage to punch through. But
Yeah.
here's the thing: you then have these Anglo Saxons in what was a territory that was partially, that I don't want to say depopulated, but where the French were pushed out. You now have
Mhm.
Anglo Saxons there. You've got Scots and Irishmen over in the Maritimes, and you have you've got poor Nouvelle France, like the French colonists, just terrified and wondering, like like they can't understand English at the time, so they don't know which English is on their side, which English wants to wipe them out, and
Mhm.
what's going on, and why are the English fighting each other? They're utterly confused, and they've been disarmed. You have to bear in mind they've been disarmed and defeated and crushed.
Yeah.
So they actually are defenseless. They're utterly defenseless.
Now, as if I remember correctly, wasn't this was all part of the War of 1812, if I remember right?
No,
Or
this is before that.
was this preceding that?
This is preceding that, and then of
Yeah.
course, this conflict ends because the American Revolution goes through, it succeeds, and whatnot.
Yeah.
So now you got the English in Ontario, or in one part of Canada, and you've got the Quebecois in what is also called Canada, two Canadian territories, and you've got the Maritimes, and you have the British Crown kind of scratching its head, wondering what it's going to do with this hodgepodge of territory. Then America
Mhm.
decides to try again at invasion, in because this is an attempt to grab territory, and it's a sound strategy because
Yeah.
France is Napoleon and in Britain and whatnot, and you've got now Canada, which is supposed to be defenseless, but we form an alliance with the native nation founded by Tecumseh, so that it's two nations trying to kind of, you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
resist. And you also got to bear in mind
Well, kind of
Napoleon,
forced almost into an alliance of convenience.
yeah, and Napoleon also betrayed the French of North America. So you have France, which is, under Napoleon, has abandoned his obligations, which pretty normal thing for Napoleon. But on the other hand, like for this is something that never would have happened under the French monarchy. But then, but Dave, like you've got these different Canadians who have to come together, and
Yeah.
somehow, we push you guys back, and you just have this burgeoning nation that's just scratching its head, going, huh. And this is in spite of some incompetence by the British officers,
Mhm.
because we have one really great man of history who comes in. He's a great general. Britain gets him killed, and then Britain appoints some really incompetent guys who pretty much all but shoot down their own men
Yeah.
incompetently, and somehow we
Yeah.
still push you guys back.
That
And
that seems to be a repeated theme across history,
yeah,
where you start looking at, like, oh, why did these pitched battles become so brutal, so bloody? Oh, the guys in charge were absolute idiots.
yeah,
That's why. Oh,
yeah,
they were just stupid.
and you have Britain, of course, that then says, "Hey, like let's call off the hostilities in 1815." And you
Yeah.
have America. Yeah, we've bled enough. No, thank you. We don't want to
Yep.
fight anymore. And you just have both Britain and America. What do we do about Canada? It's just funny between 1815 and 1867. You just have Britain and the U.S. just going, "What do we do?" Like nobody knew what to do with us,
Yeah.
and you have Britain that decides, well, I guess we're gonna just make a nation. Like it's pretty much something that's decided over a party. Like, you know what I mean? Like over the course of a party in Charlottetown. It's like, I guess we're just gonna, basically it's a bunch of guys just drinking together and, just deciding, you know, you have John A. who's like, well, I got this mandate from the British government. How about, like, we make a nation? Oh well, I don't know. Come on, guys. Let's think about it. Like, let's decide after you guys have a bit to drink. And of course, he's the master drunkard, so of course he outdrinks everyone, and everyone decides afterwards, yeah, okay, we're doing this. I guess we're forming a nation.
Well,
It- yeah, it's like,
another repeat theme across history: decisions being made after drunken carousing.
yeah, and of
I,
course,
as I recall, there was quite a few periods across Rome's history where they were pretty famous for that.
yep. Oh, you want to know what else? Apparently, some of the heads of state of Canada and her various provinces nearly got arrested. And like from what I read up, they nearly got arrested. And basically they were told, please don't misbehave. And they're
See,
like, but see, they ended up coming up with the agreement and deciding, okay, we're a confederation. But then they found confederation's not a fun enough or sexy enough term. Dominion. Now that sounds nice.
yep.
And it's kind of like, yeah, it's a bit funny. And that's where, on the other hand, culturally, you had Quebec just always looking to France and going, yeah, we're surrounded by Anglo-Saxons, but we're French. You know, like, let's look to France. And you have, since World War II, you have France. You know, maybe, Quebec has a lot of the traditional culture because, like somehow it got crystallized in time. And I guess we should culturally look for inspiration to Quebec. So there's this weird thing that happens with French Canada and France where you have France trying to imitate Quebec and you have Quebec trying to imitate France. And so you have it's just so weird. Like our movie industry and theater industry is just so weird because they're just trying to imitate each other. And like Quebec's trying to be more French than France, and France is trying to be more Quebecois than Quebec. But all that's happening is, you know what I mean? Like, there's some, I don't know what's going on there. It's just so funny and silly. It's kind of like how I've been talking to some Australians lately, and they're trying to be more English than the English. But then when I talk to some Englishmen, some of them are trying to be more like the Australians, thinking, the Australians have a lot more, the Australians have a lot of the traditional English values. What are you guys doing? Just imitate yourselves. Stop imitating someone else. And meanwhile, you have Canada, like our Anglo-Canada, that's just scratching its head and going, guess we should just look to England. And you also have, now that I think about it, some of my Australian friends and some of the Australian culture also looking to Canada. So England's looking to Australia, Australia's looking to Canada, and Canada's looking to England, and it's this weird telephone game of what the culture is. And sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't. But England is looking more and more to its own past for its culture, and I like that. But Canada, but yeah, anyways, I've been looking up more of Canada's intellectual direction. In the what's interesting is how hostile the post 1867 Canadians were to America and liberalism, and they came up with the ideology of communitarianism, where Canada is a centralized community of 3 clans, 3 tribes: the Gaels, the French, and the English. Now, in reality, the Gaels and the French are almost like siblings, so it's almost more 2. But they were very hostile to the U.S. But what's interesting is when you look up some of the British documents, some of the English leading up to World War I and during World War I were hostile to the Canadians and like the Americans better. And so Canada was kind of this child trying to be, we called ourselves the eldest son of empire and the Red Ensign. We were trying to be Daddy's favorite, but Daddy just hated us. And Daddy liked America better and thought that maybe the revolution was just temporary and America could just be persuaded to kind of do a union with Britain. But it's a little sad just to look up the documents and the genuine heartbreak that Canadians felt from 1867 to 1945, because Canada genuinely wanted to be loved by Britain, but was despised or disregarded or taken for granted.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is also right in the lead up to World War II, there were intellectuals realizing where this was going, and they were hoping to hook up with Germany against Britain and America. And that's an interesting little fact. We nearly ended up joining the Axis, but
Yep, that's a fact I've heard before.
But the thing is, Britain then sacked a lot of our elites, and basically Britain and FDR basically started appointing officials, and basically like completely rotated the government around because you're prepping for a war with Germany. You don't want, no offense, arguably your best colony in terms of soldiers and resources going to the other side. Like, you're screwed if that happens, and you can't afford another war on another front. But yeah, just interesting little fun fact. As a Canadian, it breaks my heart because it's like, like Canada at its core just wants to be loved by Britain. But ultimately, on a national level, on a macro level, it's impossible to an extent. Like, we can be loved by the individual English, but England herself has mixed feelings about Canada. There's a strong bond between England and the U.S. But on the other hand, there is a bond with Canada. We are the Red Ensign. We are the son of empire. But there's a different kind of bond. But Canada is also a weird child because we also have Quebec. We are part French. So there's also a strong bond with France, who always looks to Canada as a favorite son. So, like, if the U.S. is a favorite child of England and Britain's, or at least like there's a strong bond there, a special relationship, as we all know. But Canada has a kind of relationship similar to that with France, which tends to look on Canada with a lot of affection and love and warmth. So, but whenever I meet an Englishman, they're always excited because they love Canada. So this is more something from like the 19th century, 20th century. There was this weird three-way telephone game. It's a little interesting reading up the documents. Forty Sacks, a Canadian intellectual, has been doing a lot of posts and essays on this. And it's like, wow, this is weird. There's a weird love affair or ménage à trois happening here between these three nations. But yeah, as far as how that applies to fantasy fiction, I would say that Canada as the monarchist nation, and also because even Quebec culture is infused with a great deal of monarchism, like all French culture is. And Canada really does, like a third of it, like a part of its culture does derive from Quebec, just as it does from the Maritimes and from Southern Ontario and even Alberta. Like, these are all strong cultural centers. And I'd argue there's a monarchical element baked into the fabric of our nation. And in this, we're closer to France and the two other Celtic nations of Ireland and Scotland, also because we have the Maritimes, which are very much purely Celtic. So all of Eastern Canada is basically a Celtic, like another Celtic nation. Mm-hmm. But everything west of Quebec is an Anglo-Saxon nation. It's English. But it's a different kind of Englishness from America. It's, I guess you could say, authoritarian and communitarian. And it's just reconciling liberalism to that is very hard and weird. Like, I'm not, like, us going liberal was a weird thing that happened, and it's kind of goes against the traditional Canadian values. And the other thing is that, like, I just wonder, because, like, like, we're like, Canada's very much attached to the royal family for good reason, because it's tradition. But, like, it's for different reasons from, say, America. A lot of Americans like the monarchy because you guys just are fond of it. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a celebrity, but a different kind for you guys. You know what I mean? It's foreign. It's interesting.
There's an in-baked fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, like, I think to put it in extremely simple terms, like my mom had, I think, described it really well years ago in very simple terms. Back when, oh God, I think this was right back when, what's her face, that insufferable woman who went over and hooked up with the prince. Can't remember her name. It doesn't really matter. She's
Oh yeah, I know.
Kate something or other. Uh, my
No, I
mom
think it was
was
Megan.
Megan. Yes, Meghan Markle. I think.
Okay, you remembered her last name. I couldn't for a minute.
Yeah. So she when she hooked up with the prince, I remember my mom was watching, media all about that stuff, like just eating it up. And I asked her at one point, I'm like, why do you care? And she
Yeah,
said, well, it's interesting. We don't have like kings and queens and princes out here, so it's just kind of neat. And
I
I
get
mean,
that.
I didn't really like. I partly got it, but at the same time, like I got it from the conceptual standpoint of,
Hmm.
yeah, we don't have princes, princesses, kings, queens. We don't have monarchic system in America. So it is interesting. It is interesting in that sense, and I understand that. When I was posing the question to her, I don't think she realized that what I meant was like, yeah, but these individual people are extremely vapid. Who cares? You know,
Yeah,
it's
like
like
well, I think that like for Canada, it's tradition. You know what I mean? Like we need
yeah,
some sort of thing to root ourselves, like root our identity in a way, because a lot of Anglo Canadians are actually deracinated, and so they cling to the monarchy more as a piece of driftwood in the ocean. You know what I mean? Um, and here's a fun fact. One thing I do like about a lot of Anglo Canadians I have met is a lot of them are Catholic. So they also cling to Holy Mother Church as like a piece of driftwood as well. It's like, these things will give us some sort of, you know what I mean? Like root. Because
some
we
sort of
need,
grounding.
yeah. Now, a lot of them are like, we cannot become part of the United States. We're just two different nations. It's not that a lot of them hate the US well, I should reword it. They hate the concept of joining, but they do like Americans. But they have the attitude, we're separate, we're a different breed, but we need some sort of grounding. You know what I mean? Like some sort of point of separation. And you have, of course, a lot of Americans who are quite nice to us, and vice versa. But just as Americans need to differentiate themselves from Canadians, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like there's different myths, there's different stories, there's a different culture. But I would argue that American culture is its entirely own thing at this point. Like it is a very much different beast than, say, Australian culture or English culture
Oh, very
or,
much is.
yeah. Canadian culture, I don't know if Anglo Canadians fully realize it. I quite like them, but I notice a lot more similarities between them and Irish culture. Anglo Canada borrows a lot more from Ireland and Scotland than it realizes, I think. And it's very much an interesting thing that maybe in it, I don't know if it's inadvertent or advertent. I couldn't tell you. And I think that this blend of the Celtic, because most Canadians, even Anglophones, have some strain of the Celtic, like Celtic ancestors in their veins. And it's kind of infused them with a different kind of attitude and taste and whatnot. It's very peculiar, very interesting. But it's just some of the festivals and traditions I notice is just different than what I see when I've traveled for the U.S. But like honestly, I actually think I don't know. I quite like film festivals and whatnot in Quebec, and I also enjoyed attending something like that in the US. Like, but you don't see that in Anglo Canada really.
Yeah.
So Anglo Canada is a lot more deracinated, but who knows what the future holds. But ultimately, there's a more monarchical strain of and savage strain. Like you look at Call of the Wild, that's very much Canadian. Like that's a great description of the Canadian psychology and whatnot. Um, and that just to set them apart. But you also have, interestingly, like the French DNA just kind of baked into the fabric of our society. So yeah, how did we get on this topic? I don't know. But for fantasy fiction, I'd say weirdly, Canada doesn't seem to produce as much fantasy fiction as America. Now, for one thing, America has a population of between 330 million and 400 million. So there's obviously going to be more artists and writers coming out of America.
Yes.
It's just a fact. And but the thing is, like, Canada's main art scene is in Quebec. I don't know why, it just is. But Quebec gets a lot of investment from France, which is
I was going to say it probably has to do with that French tie.
Yeah.
I mean, France is one of the old world pillars of art. So it makes sense to me that Quebec would be where Canada is concerned, given that close tie to French history, French culture, and the nation of France. Makes sense to me that's kind of where the nation of Canada's like artistic pillar would lie too.
Yeah, although interestingly, there's a real passion for fantasy fiction in Canada. I've met a lot of Conan fans up here, and Conan is a firmly Texan character, right? So it's a little interesting that Conan the Barbarian has so many passionate fans up here. And it's getting to be more and more that when I pitch my stories to readers up here, it's like, think Conan. And they go, okay, I'm game. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, holy crap. I had no idea my nation was such a fan of Conan. I've got,
Yep.
I got one friend who calls Canada Samaria jokingly. He's obviously very, very funny guy. And he's like, oh yeah, but that's our book. No, it's Texan. No. It's deep down Canadian. No, it's not. And he's like, well, I want it to be. It's like, just because you want it
Texan
to
and
be.
Irish.
Yeah, it's like, just because you want it to be doesn't mean it is. Yes, it does. And there's always this. And like, like it's funny, but that's the thing. Like, there's a monarchical strain, and there's like that community oriented strain in us. So I think fantasy fiction, it's so odd. Canada for TV shows has produced mostly comedies and horrors, and yet like I don't know why we've not produced more fantasy novels or dramas. Like I know there's not the money, but like what I mean is like low budget stuff or like fantasy novels or something. And you actually talk to a lot of like I was involved in the art scene in the city I lived in that's on the border of the US. And honestly, the Americans that came in had a good idea of like they had very interesting artistic ideas. And same with the Japanese that would flow into that city because there was a major Japanese art scene there. I don't know why, there just was. And this was not a major city, by the way. I'm not going to dox myself and say which city, but the city in question, I sometimes visit. But when I was a student and I was involved in the art scene there, it was mostly literary stuff and pretentious nonsense that wasn't going anywhere. And it's like, how do I put it? When I tell them, listen, your work and mine elicits more reaction. And they're like, well, that's just because it's historic stuff. No, but like maybe we're leaning in the wrong direction and this doesn't resonate with Canadians, with the Canadian experience. And of course, I'm a colonist and I'm a bigot for proposing literary might not be something that appeals to Canadians. And because, like the Canadian experience is very much tied with the romantic movement of the 19th century culturally. Because, we were a direct, Britain fed a lot of artists into Canada, a lot of people into us. Like a lot of British would travel for Canada in the 19th century because the people had a love for the nation and for the landscape. It was like the West Indies in a way, you know what I mean? Like that's how it was treated. And the romantic movement just overtook. And there's a lot of paintings of Canada's natural sites and whatnot. Actually, I nearly wept when I saw some Red Ensign flags painted in some of those paintings. It's just, like how far we have fallen. But you look at that and you go, well, we're still very much infused with that sentiment about ourselves. Quebec still pours romantic sentiments into every piece of art, every painting, every book, everything, unless it's subversive deconstructive nonsense, at which point, yeah, okay. But that's liberal nonsense. But if it's not liberal, Quebec's creating stuff that's very romantic. It's still, or at least a neo-romantic sentiment. And Canada, like I talk to Canadians and they say, like when I sell Crown of Blood, I just tell them, well, it's fantasy, and they get excited. But if I was to say, like, it's very literary, I once tried that just as an experiment at one place when I was trying to sell some books, and they just reacted with disgust. And the average Canadian on the street is very much someone with tastes more akin to that of England or Scotland or Ireland in a way. And
that's very true out here too. Like, in reality, if we're talking about in reality, the issue of people not reading is broad and extensive. But among the people I know who do read, among the people that I've talked to, and even those I don't know who I've talked to that read, they tend generally to prefer genre fiction over something that's more literary, particularly modern literary. Some older literary stuff still carries its weight, but in particular, a lot of the modern literary stuff, there's really very little interest in that. It's all just vanity projects, basically.
Now, I will actually defend one literary author I recently discovered. She's written, I've only read a bit of an excerpt. And what I read of her prologue is, because she shared from her website preview, and like I said, well, I want to prove to you not all literary authors are terrible. And what I read was pretty damn good. You know what I mean? It's like, so I think the talent's out there. It's just,
I agree with that.
She's American, but she's passionate about fantasy. It's just she doesn't write that, and I think the talent is there. Like I said, I was noting the direction of history and how Canada and U.S. and Britain, there was this weird relationship between the three. It ran hot and cold between the three of us in the 19th century. This is just a fact, and throughout a good chunk of the 20th century. But at the same time, when you look at today, there's all this literary stuff that, when it comes to, let's say, fantasy fiction, I may champion nationalistic fantasy fiction, but good fantasy art knows no borders. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I read your stuff. I don't go this is written by an American. No, of course not. I'm not thinking about that when I'm reading your stuff. I have to read, I think, one story of yours for the Lunar Awards, and shout out to them, by the way. And the thing is, it's really good. And
a very Celtic story, by the way.
yeah, that's what I love about it. And see, I look at McKenna's microfiction, and I don't think, oh yeah, this is an American. I don't even think about that.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. But hell, I'll even go so far as to say, I love Mark Twain. I love Jack London, and Jack London captured the Canadian spirit very well. Robert E. Howard, like that's the thing. Like, but I also read like all these authors from England, from a few from Canada, and the thing is, we have to bear in mind that, like I said, I'm just commenting that your cultural elements do influence your culture, your story, but like um, it's something that, um, like for example, how do I put it? Canada and U.S. often knock heads.
Uh-huh.
Like let's not sugarcoat it. We knock heads, and it's two completely different cultural visions of the world. At its core, Canada, has that communitarian mentality, which is community before individuality. Strong, basically, to an extent, authoritarianism. Let's just call it what it is. You know what I mean? Like, let's not sugarcoat.
Yes.
And Canada comes with a certain monarchical streak. Like wherever England goes, Canada follows. Let's be blunt, whether it's for good or ill. Wherever France goes, Quebec follows. Like whether it's good or ill. Like if a policy passes in France, Quebec has to adopt it. A policy passes in England, well, Canada has to apply it. It's always going to be this way. It's always been this way. But the U.S., like there's individualism that's at the core of the U.S. There's that frontiermanship mentality in a lot of your literature. Yeah. There's a very different vision of the world. Like the U.S. is predicated on a lot of Enlightenment ideas, while Canada is predicated on anti-Enlightenment ideas. And I don't think, like, I'm not saying this to attack one nation or praise one nation. It's just, it's the way it is.
It's just the facts of the matter.
Yeah. And like half my fan base on Substack are Americans. And I don't think, like, I've been finding out that a lot of my fans there's some that are Democrats, are with the Democrat Party or with the Republican Party. I don't know why, like, it crosses this, but like I'm completely outside the different particularities of the American politics, and yet both.
Yeah,
like the Brothers Grimm just has this weird fan base, and I'm not calling my fans weirdos, but you guys are kind of weirdos. I'm joking, but like there's this weird.
I mean, I'll say it outright. People who like my work are probably weird, and they're probably weird because I'm weird too.
Yeah, that's fair. But like I'm not, like, I'm just commenting that it's a funny fact of history that like Canada, for like one reason or another, always knocks heads with US, and I've got all these American fans when I'm pretty passionate about my nation. And I like to think it's because like whatever American fans I have probably have the mentality, oh well, good for you, like not in a patronizing way, just a respectful, oh, good for you, you should love your nation. Like just a respectful
that is something. Speaking of like cultural differences between America and some other nations, that is probably one of the biggest when it comes to American culture, is the idea of American pride. There are, particularly post the managerial experiment, there's a lot of nations out there, like in the first world, that they don't do the national pride thing. Certainly not like how we do it. And of course, there are definitely multiple areas in the United States where they don't do it either. I live in one of them, as you well know. But there's, that sentiment you're seeing is, that's kind of a cultural pillar in the United States, I think. Like one of those ones that doesn't get a lot of light shown on it anymore, but is a lot more present than I think a lot of people still realize here, meaning people here in the US. I think there's a lot of people who don't understand like how strong that
national pride, that
And
spirit of rugged individualism, like all those,
yeah,
early American ideals that helped found this nation still run.
yeah, and to contrast that, now here, what I will say is also interesting is that with America, in terms of fantasy fiction, you kind of have to peel back a lot of the Enlightenment. You know what I mean? You need to,
Yes.
like what Howard did. But what's interesting is, um, you can probably do the, uh, I would say, like fantasy fiction from the U.S. For good reason draws from like Star Wars. Now, what I mean is, like Star Wars is basically a group in both the prequels and originals, a group of misfits banding together. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, like a bunch of really cool individuals coming together and trying to save the galaxy from the Sith. That's even the KOTOR stuff, even those Jedi Knight games that I love so much. They have all this, like
Yeah.
and
A ragtag group of unlikely heroes.
yeah. Whereas what's interesting is that to look at like Tolkien, you do have unlikely heroes, but there's much. It's a fellowship. You know what I mean? Like this fellowship of heroes banding together. It's kind of like the Argonauts. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
like there could probably be a novel about Boromir. There could probably be a full novel about Merry or Aragorn or Gimli. Oh my gosh, I wish there was a novel about Gimli. But anyways,
Speaking of, this is just a slight detour. Just want you to know we're currently amongst all the other stuff. My wife and I are fostering 4 more kittens from her works, little ones. We've named them after the hobbits. It's technically 4. They're all siblings, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. But where we figured, Mary and Sam, those can be girls' names too. So you got Mary, Sam, Frodo, and Pippin.
cool. That's awesome. I love that.
The timing was really funny too, because I think within a day of us finally deciding, because we tossed around so many ideas, like, what are we going to call this? Like these 4, what are we going to call them? And then I came up, it just hit me like, oh, well, Mary and Sam can work as girls' names. Just name them after the hobbits. And then a day later, I think she finds out, hey, so a little puppy just got adopted from the shelter today. Would you like to see his name? It was Frodo. So they're going to get a brand new Frodo once we get these ones raised up to adoption age.
That's awesome. But see, well, I was just going to say, like, for fantasy fiction from, like, actually, now that I think about it, even Conan, Hour of the Dragon, very much emphasizes, these rugged band of heroes who have to join together to resist Nemedia. But although Howard's fiction doesn't feel like, how do I put it? There's emphasis on primarily the main character, Conan. But, he's essentially inspired by Conn of the 100 Battles from Irish mythology. So there's a strong Irish element. So that's like a half Irish, half Texan. It's like its own thing. You know what I mean? Like, whereas Star Wars and most other stories, like even Dragonlance, I find borrows a lot from Star Wars in the sense of this unlikely band of heroes joining together all the time. And I quite like that. If I was to say, like, Canada, I'm going to be honest, it'd probably be, there will be a savage element there should be a savage element to any fantasy fiction of Canada. Something violent in it. But because, like, any record of wars from, like, okay, how do I put it? War crimes is basically baked into the Canadian martial ethos, because, we have to.
I mean, a good example of it comes from the book version for The Last of the Mohicans from James Cooper. So, I mean, that novel takes place during the French-Indian War, and one of the historical events that he includes in it was
one of the major massacres that happened during that war under the leadership of who, after this massacre, I'm blanking on his name. It was a French general who was leading a band of I'm trying to remember.
But I have to remind
But-
everyone, France did nothing wrong. I'm joking.
Well,
I'm joking.
it was a French general who was leading a band of, I think, Iroquois natives. It was like a special contingent under his reign of force, and this band just went fucking berserk and butchered a colony of Englishmen that the general had said that, like, you know, per the rules of engagement, rules of war, we are giving you safe passage. We're letting, like, your civilians pass through this area, letting the women and children go through, and they got massacred. And so the general was viewed as like a complete incompetent for being unable to control those men. But
yeah, and
it's that same sort of idea, because
what
you see that repeated in that story is like there is that, and you do see it repeated kind of on both sides, from the English or the
because
Anglo
like the
side and
Hurons,
French side.
the Hurons who were the primary ally of Nouvelle France were wiped out. Well, a large portion of them were wiped out by the Iroquois, who were allied with the English, and the English took them off.
Yes, it was the Hurons was the one I was trying to remember.
And the French were terrified and took in a lot of Hurons to, you know, like, because they've been displaced and a lot of them have been butchered. And the French ended up taking in the Hurons and teaming up with them. And the Hurons were one of the tamer tribes compared to the Iroquois, who don't really have a good reputation in a lot of places in North America. But my point was just that.
Yeah.
My point was just that, like, Canadians learned early to fight dirty because we don't have the numbers America does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where how I look at it is, you know, underdogs. The underdog element is a strong strain in a lot of Canadian literature because we are the underdogs. No offense.
Yeah.
America's not the underdog.
No, I mean, well, there's none taken. And like if you look at early American literature, there's some of that in early American literature too. A lot of the heroes are underdogs, and I think it ties. Well, like you mentioned the idea of the Canadians learned to fight dirty because they didn't have the numbers. I would expand that to say the colonies learned to fight dirty. Canadian and American learned to fight dirty for the same reasons. Because I mean, that was the same. It was true of us during the Revolutionary War. We didn't have the numbers to match the British Army and the British Navy, but we knew the land, we knew how to ambush, and we made, like, the Revolutionary warfighters made good use of that and ultimately won the war because of that.
Yeah, and then you had also the French who, with that meme, we're not really into World War.
French assistants at the time, because, you know, they
just wanted to beat the English.
Not friends.
They just wanted to beat the English.
They're just like, well, the English kind of, you know, we're still a bit salty about that French-Indian War thing. So, hey, American colonists, here's a little bit of help.
And you've got, but the interesting thing, I just think, is how little Canadian fantasy fiction there is. And looking at it, it's like we've got an overpopulation of horror fiction. I don't know why. I'm just saying we have an overpopulation of horror up here.
So I have a hypothesis, and it runs similar to a gag I had seen about Scandinavian stories, where the guy was basically talking about this guy. It's a skit that this guy is a Norwegian dude does skits, where it's like you got one guy asking, like, "Hey, I'm looking for a good game. You know any good Norwegian games?" Like, "Oh, you could try Limbo. You're a child who's trying to survive in a dark and oppressing world." Sounds interesting, but kind of depressing. Got any other suggestions? And he gives like 7 or 8 other suggestions that are all about surviving in a dark and oppressive world surviving a dark, oppressive winter, surviving a cold, harsh winter, surviving a cold, harsh winter world. Like, it's always the same thing. I think there's something of that
Well,
northerly drive there.
I will
Because
argue that Canada is kind of a Scandinavian nation in some ways.
yeah, no, it certainly is. You know, there is, and both America and Canada like are going to have their pockets of Scandinavian influence. Funny
Mm.
enough, I believe. Oh, let me make sure. I believe Minnesota, in particular,
Oh, I like
heavy Scandinavian influence, because I believe it was around Minnesota where massive number of the Scandinavian population that first came and settled America settled there.
yeah, and
Probably because the weather's kind of similar
well, sort of tamer though, but
in some ways.
they don't get real winters. I'm joking.
Not in terms of the snow, but in terms of the cold. Like, it bites to the bone. But
the funny thing about Minnesota though is I just remember it because of Marshall from How I Met Your Mother.
mm-hmm.
That's the only reason I know there's some Scandinavian
Haven't
there.
talked about that show in a while.
Yeah, man, like that was a good show. But I like that show. Weirdly enough, I really
I do
like.
too.
Yeah, and I just remember because at one point the character of Marshall takes out a war horn and blows it out the window of a car, and I remember just almost peeing myself from laughing the first time I saw that. It's like, oh my gosh. And I didn't know there was a hockey team called the Vikings in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But I thought that was absolutely charming and hilarious. So Minnesotans, and I actually went to university in Japan with a Minnesotan. An absolutely delightful young girl who was of Scandinavian descent. And it was, and I'll be honest, I'm quite fond of Minnesota because of all these factors. So of all the states, they're one of my favorites.
Yeah, Minnesota, if memory serves, pretty sizable Scandinavian population, pretty sizable Germanic population too.
Yeah.
So I know
Well,
my
you guys have
mom's
a lot of
family.
Germans.
My mom's side of the family comes from, originally came partly from Minnesota. It was on her mom's side, and her mom's side of the family was originally Austrian immigrants that came over. And then my granddad's side on her side of the family was, pretty much straight English.
Austrian, German, what's the difference? They all speak German. I'm joking. I'm joking. Actually, I've once cracked that joke.
I actually from when I took German classes in college, I can tell you the difference between the Austrians and the Germans, because the head of the department who taught most of my classes was Austrian. But the conversational half of the class, she was German. The Austrians of the two, and this is going to be ironic, considering a certain someone everybody knows from history, the Austrians of the two are more laid back. Unless they fail art school, apparently.
Now, the funny thing is, though, that what I find, well, I was cracking a joke about to us French, like Austrian, German. What's the difference? And they're both a failed French colony, just like England, just a failed French colony. Like, what's the difference? I'm joking.
Yeah, I know.
There's a joke I've seen one Frenchman on Twitter crack. Austria, Germany, parts of Italy, Spain, England. What do they all have in common? You have him. They're all failed French colonies. The only successful French colony is Quebec in Canada. Well, Quebec/Canada. So, give it to the Canadians. They're our first success. The rest of you are all failures. And it's like, the guy took so much heat for that comment, for that joke. He was like, so many people spurred out on him. And
they obviously missed the part where it's supposed to be humor.
Yeah, and he just simply said, "People are just proving my point." And he he even joked. I think it was like, well, of all the colonies, Canada's the only one due to economic circumstances that's had to move back in with mom, but the rest of you had to be kicked out of mom's basement, and you're still bitter about it. And he's like, and you have one person, oh yeah, where did Canada move? Back into the basement? Yet him, no. Don't you realize it? Canada's colder in terms of the climate, so they moved into the attic.
Yeah,
It's
that's what I
like,
was going to say.
yeah,
Well,
it's just
like,
so
well, look how far north they are. Obviously, they went upwards. They
yeah,
went to the drafty attic.
yeah. And I remember just saying, yeah, the only trouble is the attic's way too hot in the summer. That's just yeah, but really nice guy. I forget his surname. It's like Galbi something. I read it on Twitter, but it's such a normal French surname. I can't, you know what I mean? Like you just never remember it. It doesn't stick out, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. But the guy is really funny. He's like a radio personality or something, and he's just so freaking funny. But he has a French and an English account, and he just cracks nothing but anti like everyone jokes. Like I think he once joked, "I'm an equal opportunity French bigot." Like if him, you see, like you have him, the Germans, the English, the Scandinavians, the Africans, the Asians, the Americans, everyone.
The old,
You all
the
look
old
the same to
joke,
me.
I'm not racist. I hate everyone equally.
Yeah, and he's like the only people I think he once said, you all suck except the Japanese because you're traditional French allies, so you're cool, but the rest of you all suck. And it's like, and he's just so funny. And when I said at one point, I want to make a mythology for France, he said, based. I knew Canada was eventually gonna, what is it? I knew all those investments in Canada would eventually pay off. It's finally paying off after 500 years. About time. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He's like,
Took long enough.
yeah, and he's like, it had to eventually pay off. You put enough quarters in, you'll eventually win something. And I said, wait, so Canada's just one big slot machine? You've been a slot machine since 1534. That's when like they first started colonizing Canada. So it's like you're a slot machine that we've been putting coins in for 500 years. You're finally paying off. And he's like, finally. Like, just really funny guy. It's like I think he is a comedian.
Just wait until the casino adjusts the metrics again.
yeah. I remember just saying like, well, wait till the house the house always wins. Remember
the house comes to get its cut.
Yeah, and he said, well, yeah, but in my head the house is France, and I said, but it isn't because France, France hasn't been winning for like 100 years, and you have shut up, like, let me have my fantasy. It's like he's like, let me have my fantasy. You write yours, I have mine in my head. That we always win somehow. And it's like, but like I said, really funny guy. I know his first name's like Emmanuel or something. But like he's just really funny and obnoxious. But
sounds like a talented troll.
Yeah, most of his Twitter account is just him trolling. I think I occasionally repost his posts, so you might occasionally see him crop up. I just like how he trolls everyone, and he trolls me all the time. Like most of his comments, well, occasionally he'll clarify a point because I don't understand a joke, and he'll just clarify it for me. And he's very respectful and polite when he does. He doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, he's one of those people. He doesn't belong on Twitter. He doesn't spurg out. He just trolls and explains stuff.
Yep.
And like, how do I put it? He's a lot like Copernican. But with like if Copernican and Fisto had a love child.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's a horrifying image, isn't it?
That you know what? For those in the know, taking all bets here, you can tell us in the comments, the Copernican Fisto love child, the most amazing thing ever, or one of the most terrifying? Because I'm really not sure.
I'm not sure either. I'm really not
We
sure.
gotta get- I don't. You remember if Copernicus has ever ended up on Black Ibis? Because if it isn't, it needs to, just so that he and Fisto can
I'm pretty
like,
sure he
bounce
has.
off each other. I think he did. I think it was a while ago.
Yeah. Well, they need to have him on again because it's been
Yeah,
too
they
long.
do.
But I think, like I said, but this guy was very encouraging though, and did complain to me at one point. You ought to be writing in French a little more because you have a lot of English projects, but it's just the French projects are so freaking massive and long that you know what I mean. Like I can't just fart them out and publish them. It's just like when I write in French, these are long spanning novels or stories. And like the elf stories that I've translated or put up on Substack, um, that's like half the stories I write. The other half are these sprawling uh, novels. Like, how do I explain it? Well, you've read a bit of Olymp no Machi. That's kind of my elf stories.
Yes.
You can't really or the Heracles novel. Those take a while to compose, and
they're in depth. They're highly detailed. It's the kind of story that you can't just like throw out in the span of like one or like you can't just pump out a chapter in a day and just be like, all right, now on to the next one. That's more complex, more in depth.
Like you remember the Oricillian elf story? Those I pumped out in 6 hours. So the time frame for a between 6 and 12 page elf story is 6 hours minimum when I'm not even thinking about it. But when I am thinking about it, it bogs down, it slows down. But then you've got Chute d'Innocence and its sequels, and even Cat Palatin. These are books where, Joseph L. Weiss at one point said one chapter, which was composed of 7 or 8 sub-chapters, was 100 pages long. And the narrative is very slow-paced, like beyond slow-paced, because it's inspired by Victor Hugo and Pillars of the Earth. So it's like exceptionally slow-paced. The character moves at a snail's pace. And like the average length of my French novels is usually between 12 and 2,400 pages. So these are very long stories. And the English novels, I can just, it's not that I'm making lower quality stuff. It's just, it's more for fun. Like it's not these sprawling novels. It's except for Gemstone, which is this sprawling book, which I didn't intend, but like it's more slow. Well, it's not slow, but it's like these adventure novels that I can put out and have fun with and play with, and you know what I mean? Like, it's just very different narrative. I'm almost scared to master Gaelic so that and what's going to come out of that. But yeah, like, but I'm also making a purposeful effort to imitate Howard and Tolkien in English. So that's a different mentality. Like in French, I'm trying to imitate Dumas and Hugo and Homer. So, because I read Homer in French more. So like these are, you know what I mean? Like massive books. And whereas in English, I'm imitating authors who don't write like, you know what I mean? Like 2,000 page books. I say imitate, but like emulate, I should say, and operate. And I'm learning to operate in smaller volumes because like Swift Shadow Murders was a experiment, and Varcola's an experiment to write smaller books because I don't know how, and I'm trying to write smaller so that I can also write larger. You know what I mean? In a different context and manner. But like when Gemstone comes out, you'll see how big it is, and it's a doorstopper, and it's humongous, and it's supposed to be a sprawling epic. It's, I think it was the first sprawling epic I wrote in English, because everything else was these tiny or self-contained stories, except for Calibog, which was a mediocre book. But Gemstone's supposed to be a proper epic, and that's where I gotta now beg you, like, you've written some pretty small volumes here and there. You're gonna have to write a sprawling epic at some point.
I might.
Oh, come on, Dave. I'll get on my knees and beg. Don't make me beg, bro. Don't make me beg.
Something like that is kind of coming together a little bit with Geyer's stories. So it may happen, it may not. It sort of depends on the directions the wind takes me.
Okay.
But
that's a good mentality.
I've had ideas in mind for things like that. Ideas I may revisit, ideas I may work on again.
I have an Australian friend. What he says is, I'm ruminating. He likes the term ruminating.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm ruminating. He's got this massive sci-fi, like, what's that sci-fi hero who inspired Star Wars? Flash Gordon. He's got like this massive Flash Gordon universe plan, and he's written quite a few pieces. He's got a box full of these stories, like what Howard had. And what he says is, I'm ruminating new stories. He's not picked up the pen, but he's just saying, I ruminate over tea and a cigarette.
It wasn't Flash Gordon. No, Flash Gordon came after Star Wars. I know the one you're talking about, though, and I'm blanking on it.
That makes two of us.
I'll see if I can figure it out. But please go ahead and continue, and I'll see if I can figure it out.
Well, all I was going to say was, I would argue, Hour of the Dragon was an epic. That's a sprawling epic. Like, I know it's only like 300, 400 pages, but it feels like a sprawling epic. Like, the scope feels as big as Lord of the Rings. It's humongous. It's glorious. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, but on the other hand, I'm not gonna lie. Like, to everyone listening, I also, like I've said before, I want to write cozy fiction, just for fun, to try it out. And I think that, you know, you've already tried your hand at cozy. I got to try my hand at cozy, but I'd invite you to.
We were remembering, right? It was Flash Gordon. It was the older version of Flash Gordon before they completely revamped and remade the character in the 80s. And then, like, that 80s version kind of overtook the old one, and that's like the 80s one is the one everyone remembers now because of that.
Yeah, and all I mean is that, like, you know, like a bit of the Tolkien Lewis challenge. I challenge you to maybe next year start on a grand narrative with Geyer, and I, on the other hand, have to make sure I start next year. Well, I continue next year because I already started, but I just put it on hiatus because I was starting it in French. I gotta write my cozy fiction story because I very much want to try my hand at cozy. It just looks fun.
Yeah.
And but it'd also be something I wouldn't want to be like 1,000 pages. I want it to be a total contrast to my other fantasy fiction in French, and just have it be like 100-page or 120-page book, and just like not write something massive, because right now I'm trapped having to revise and edit shit Dino Silence, and it's a nightmare, and it's been taking me almost a year and a half because of how big the book is. It started off 1,549 pages long, and it's now 1,517 because of the revisions and rewrites and rewording and whatnot.
Yeah.
And this thing's already been revised 6 times, and now I'm revising it again. And No, it's like closer to 9 or 10 times. This thing's just, I'm sick of it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm sick of it.
Yeah, it gets difficult after a while.
Yeah, and I don't even know if this thing's going to be a success. So I don't even know if it'll ever get translated. I know Joseph L. Weiss and a few others told me to translate it, but bear in mind it's 1,500 pages. That would take me months to maybe a year or two to translate because it's just so big.
It's a sizable undertaking. My suggestion for that, particularly because you're stuck in the grindhouse of revision at the moment.
Mhm.
Work on probably like either this or the next as the final revision for it. Get everything ready, get it together, get it set for publication. Run it by a couple of beta readers or trusted editors, of course, all that stuff too, because there might be things they catch that you've missed. But get that ready, get the French version out there, and then let it sit for a bit. Finish a couple other things, step away from it, so that you can kind of come back to fresh eyes later on, and then decide like,
yeah,
I'm going to, or no, I'm not.
This set of revisions was started from needing to reformat, like just the formatting.
Yeah.
Like I'm just trimming a few things while I'm formatting.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, basically is the final revision.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, on Raul and Brian Meyer's advice, very kind advice, I'm gonna chop it up into 3 volumes.
Yeah.
But this is basically the same book. It's just I can't publish this as a 1,500-page doorstopper. Not if I like. I can, but like I'm not gonna get paid for it. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
It's not gonna go anywhere. Whereas if I get like the 500 page, like the 575 pages so far, like sorted out, like I'll be able to put it out and whatnot. Now, if I don't translate it myself, what I would want to do, if it's popular enough, is convince the publisher, because I'm probably going to try to get through a proper publisher, and just ask them, since as you suggested, and just ask them if this thing does well enough, can we get this translated into English? Because I do have a decent sized English fan base, and like it's not that I want to neglect one fan base. It's just that, like, this thing is such a sizable undertaking to translate on my own, and also write all the other stories and get all the English novels sorted out. Because, like, while I express irritation with Arcola right now, I do deep down like the story. Because it's a vampire story. It's fun and it's Bram Stoker style. Like, and after that, like I've got Akuma no Ran I really want to finish, and Journey to Kingship. Journey to Kingship's just 8 chapters. It's a novella or novelette, but like, like Akuma no Ran is fun, and like, that's for my English and whatever Japanese audience I ever get. But like, Shittiness House, like every English reader I have who takes a look at it or translates it, with the auto Google Translate thing, they always come back to me and love it. Although Vaughn, Joseph L. Weiss, and I think Austin Boucher have told me this thing's dark. Like it's a very dark fiction. But it's dark like Berserk. You know what I mean? It's like it's this really. It's darker than all my other stuff. It's very adult. It's very grim dark. So it's nothing like a lot of my fiction in English, but but it's also different from, like, you know what I mean? Cat Paladin. Oh, I will confess that when it comes to what's it called, to I'm not even going to bother remembering all the titles for the sequels, but if shit is like Berserk grimdark, the final volume is going to be what's the term? Well, it's going to be heroic fantasy, because the idea was to go from something like a position of almost like Pillars of the Earth or Berserk Dark, and try to make the transition from that to this.
Pull it up to Hour of the Dragon.
Well, kind of, but like kind of like take it from there to a idealistic
Yeah.
Perspective. Like, what's it called on tropes, TV tropes? The sliding scale of idealism or something. Like where no, like it slides from extremely cynical to then by the end extremely idealistic.
Yep.
And optimistic. And I wanted to do this journey in tone, like, you know, where it starts off dark and then it becomes ever more optimistic and idealistic and whatnot. But it's also the backstory to the Dark Laird of Brotherhood of the Gemstone. So it's like there's a lot of his backstory in this French series. So like a lot of the evil stuff that happens is because he's around, he's running around. But then you've got, on the other hand, you know, the first check in the war between him and men and whatnot, and elves and whatnot. So, but it's different from. It's kind of like he tries the Numenorian thing. You know, he tries to do the. He tries to do that. That fails, and there will be a fight between him and a few heroes. So it's more. There is a Hour of the Dragon influence, a massive influence, in contrast to like a lot of the Tolkien stuff. But anyways, but as for Geyer, so this is where now you've got Geyer, you've got your castle on the hill, which is kind of cozy, and you've got your sailing story. I really like that you've got that.
The Pearl Diver's Adventures.
Yeah, the Pearl Diver. I really want to hear about Pearl Diver.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I just released a new one yesterday that I've been working on for the whole week. It's funny enough, it kind of clicked on me because like the last 2 or 3 of those that I wrote were because in the Giant Shadow, relatively dark story. The Jarl's Son kicks that up a notch. You know, it's definitely a darker story, definitely more involved, bigger in its scope. I mean, I'm word count wise, I'm almost double where I ended in the Giant Shadow with the Jarl's Son. It's almost twice as long at this point, so it's considerably larger story. Actually, oh no, I'm officially over twice as long, having just checked on it now.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's sitting at just over 90,000 words currently. But larger, a bit more involved. And, you know, with all the craziness that happened last week. Yeah, this last week, like basically, for those who aren't aware, I'll just keep this as brief as possible. For those not aware, the reason why I didn't post the usual Jarl's Son chapter this week, and I did detail this at the beginning of my latest Molo story that I released yesterday, The Chalice Runs Red, is I found out Monday morning I was woken up by a call from district manager for the company I work for, basically asking me like, hey, what's up with your coworker? And I said, what do you need? Is he not at the store? Oh, did you not get his text? He said he texted you. And I told him, like, I didn't hear anything. Like, this call is what woke me up. Give me a second. I'm going to check this. Before I was even awake, he texted me saying, my coworker texted me saying, basically, hey, I'm leaving the state. Obviously, this means I quit. I left my key under the door. You know, see you around. And I still don't know why he quit. I have suspicions, which I won't get into. But yeah, so for the last week, I have been open to close every single day at my store. It's probably going to be the same for the whole of this coming week, and I don't know how long that's going to continue to be. So kind of a big wrench to sort of get thrown in everything, suddenly going from 6 to 8 hour long days to 12-hour days every single day. And so I decided, instead of diving headlong back into this darker, heavier, much more involved story, that while I very much enjoy writing it and I am very pleased with the general direction everything has been going in, is nonetheless kind of exhausting to write because it requires a lot of brain power to make sure I'm keeping everything in order. I decided, let's go ahead and let's just write another Molo adventure. I've got kind of a couple ideas to play around with for that, and it sort of clicked with me. This is 2 or 3 times in a row now where something got screwed up in my work life or my home life. Just something went wrong that threw a wrench in everything. And instead of working on the big story, I just decided, you know what? Yeah, let's write the fun seafaring adventure. And it kind of clicked with me. Oh yeah, Molo has sort of become my comfort area. He's sort of my comfort character now.
He's your safe space. I'm joking.
in a manner of speaking, which is funny because this story ended up kind of being one of his darker stories. But no, it was a lot of fun. And you mentioned earlier the Star Wars influence of, ragtag groups coming together. I didn't really even think about that, but in a sense, there is a little bit of that in this story too, because the new character that I introduce in this is introduced as someone who was involved with helping Molo and his first mate Woothers get their trading venture started. And now I'm sort of looking back at it thinking like, oh yeah, so you've got the former navalman and his first mate. You've got the islander kid from the south who sailed north to try and make his own way in life and live this grand adventure in Molo. And then you've got the suave, or I guess not really the suave, but the sultry rogue type in the woman that feels like she was betrayed by them. So it's a little bit of a Star Warsy mishmash there, sort of like a Lady Han Solo in the mix to Molo's Luke, and I guess kind of Withers sort of Obi-Wan, but not really. Maybe this doesn't work as well as I thought.
Maybe.
Either way,
But
it's a fun story. People should read it.
yeah, they absolutely should. And if they don't, we'll just find them and beat them up. I'm joking. It's what's that American movie? Taken. I will find you,
Yeah.
and I will.
We'll look for you. I will find you. I will kill you.
But in all, for all that I clown on that movie, I love that movie. It's a really good movie.
Yeah. No, the first one is good. I mean, it's sort of like that's kind of like with the Saw series too. It's like the first movie in that series, actually quite good, interesting crime drama, interesting high stakes crime thriller, and then the rest of them just became over the top,
They were weird.
horror murder fests.
Yeah, they were weird. You know what they should have done with all the money from the sequels? Take that, invest it in a fantasy movie of Liam Neeson having to save his daughter in that. I'd rather see that. Him wielding a sword and whatnot, and fighting a Dark Lord or something to save his daughter.
Kind of like Qui-Gon again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he did the sci-fi thing with Star Wars. He's done the crime drama thing as in Taken. So, he's missing fantasy. What the hell's wrong with him? Like, what did fantasy ever do to him to neglect it? I'm joking.
I don't know.
Actually, let me ask, has he ever done horror?
Has Liam Neeson done? I am not sure. Yes, he has apparently. He was in The Haunting.
Oh, right. That movie. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of the few, probably the only one. Oh, wow. Jack Wayne has joined us. Welcome. Sorry, I didn't even see you earlier. Sorry about that, Jack. Cool. Yeah, Jack's a friend of ours. Remember that great romance essay of his?
I believe so.
Well, he wrote one about the romance of the Three Kingdoms and how, more people need to write great romances, like, like America should have
Yes.
her own, Canada should have her
Yes,
own.
I do remember that.
Yeah. I'm always going to be ranting and raving about that. That was such a great essay.
That essay actually got me considering ideas regarding. I mentioned James Cooper earlier in his Leatherstocking books. I mean, there are a lot of adventure elements in those stories. I mean, even with The Last of the Mohicans, there's a lot of adventure elements in that, which I think is like the second or third of those books that he wrote. The most famous one too, obviously, but a lot of those. I mean, I would argue potentially like The Last of the Mohicans. You could potentially argue could be a contender for what you could say is a great American romance, because even though it was written from the perspective of the days where it was still the English colonies, James Cooper very much an American. And it has those same sort of sensibilities to it. You can feel that sort of like love of the land, love of the people in there that you see in all the great romances from the different nations. Like, they might already have it, and just kind of a lot of people are just sleeping on it.
And the most tragic thing, though, for you is that since you're from California, everyone's just going to say when you write a great romance, that's communist literature. I had to pick on you. Sorry, Dave. It's
just... like tell them, go to Gulag.
Da, very well. I go to Gulag now. I can't do anything. So much for writing career. No, wait, hold on. Dostoevsky, Solzhenitsyn, they kind of did that. So they hold on. No, writing career starts from there. It's much.
Yes, the writing career starts in the Gulag. It starts behind bars if you're Russian.
Yeah, well, Dostoevsky comes before it. I know that, but he was kind of in a prison, and then the firing squad's assembled, and they're about to fire on him, and then he's just told, no, never mind. It was a mistake. You can go. The poor guy was traumatized from that. The poor guy. I really do. Like, I've written about the issues I have with the public image of Dost, like how academia spun him. But I actually really do like him, and I really do feel bad for him. The poor guy. It's like, I think he handled it better than I would have. I think I would have just had a breakdown.
Yeah, most people probably would have.
Yeah, like he had his breakdown.
You get dragged before the firing squad. They're about to blow your face off, and then it's like, oh, oops, clerical error. Sorry, yeah, you can go now.
Yeah,
no, we're not going to help you get home.
Yeah, and of course that's going to traumatize you. But then he wrote all that great literature and whatnot, and he still had the strength in him and the vigor to do so. That's just so impressive. Like, can you imagine what it takes? For us, it's exhausting as a writer to churn out what we do. But he had that trauma and he still pulled through. That's impressive. Sorry,
I'm sure he had his exhausting days too, just like everyone else. But
yeah. Oh, that reminds me of Joseph Conrad, whom wrote all these books, and at one point is asked by his wife, like, "Did you have a good day working up in your office today?" He says, "It was very successful. One of my most successful days. Really, I put a period at the end of a sentence." That's all he did for like 9 hours. He just sat there in front of his typewriter, staring at it, then put a period. That was it. And he said,
"Yep,
this is a good day. I put a period." Then the next day he churned out like 5 or 6 pages or something. But he felt better about just the one period he put down than he did all those pages. And it's like, geez, dude was one of those giga chads of literature. But at least he was. But yeah, like, but as for like Geyer and Pearl Diver, I will ask, what comes after? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, ignore all my.
So my plans with, I mean, I do have plans, like I mentioned some time ago. I've got, how was it that the other guy phrased it? You were saying considerations,
Rumination. He's ruminating. You're ruminating.
I'm ruminating on some things for a third story for Geyer, but obviously I got to finish the one I'm working on first.
Yeah.
I've been toying around with a couple of ideas.
Yeah. Take my advice
for that.
Just don't ever do what I did, which is to say, start like 8 or 9 stories and just go, oh shit.
Yeah, I made that mistake in the past already. So
yeah,
I learned that lesson the hard way already in my 20s, which is why I never actually completed anything in my 20s. It's like there was always some new idea that came along, and I'd be juggling 7 or 8 at once, and then none of them go anywhere. My brain just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
But the Molo stuff, the short-term plan, once Heavy gets his internet access back, he's going to be recording audio versions of those. So I need to kind of go through and finish editing each of those down to where it'd be basically publication ready. At some point, I'm going to compile them together. I will be actually publishing a physical anthology for that. I'm thinking maybe once I get around 8 to 10 stories, or I may possibly do the anthology as like, the Pearl Divers Adventures and other stories, and then grab some of the other one-off stuff that I've done and mix that in there too. Haven't fully decided that, but I will be moving on to a third story for Geyer at some point. But once I finish the Jarl's Son, the next big step actually is to go through and comb through In the Giant Shadow again to fix up some of the errors I missed and release a second edition for that fixes some of those minor errors that people have caught that, got missed by myself when I was going through final checks, and that like happened to slip by the couple of beta readers that I had. So that'll be kind of the next thing, is getting that ready to go, and then revisions, editing, eventual publication for the Jarl's Son, and moving on from there.
Because we can't all be Josh Tatter, who just never misses a thing. I'm joking. I have to pick on Josh.
I mean, let's be fair, he's got a wife and kids. So,
and he still churns out like every 2 weeks or something short stories.
Yeah.
The dude is astonishing.
And across various styles, and then there's the fact that his wife also writes along with him too on occasion, which, if you haven't, I don't know if you've read his Summertime Sins material that they worked on together with that. But like, it's a very different, because obviously it's a modern day, like it's a modern kind of romantic drama.
Okay, I'll read it.
But it's very very different feel from the fantasy stuff and the pulp action stuff. But like I mentioned when I wrote my guest review for Derek James Kitzberg Dread Reviews, the style the style they bring to it kind of together, and how Josh's particular approach to writing affected that story makes it very snappy without feeling like it's actually throwing away necessary details. That's a problem I notice with a lot of stories that are sometimes too short in the short story realm. The pace is good, the timing is good, a lot of ideas are good, but then those ideas and the characters don't end up properly explored because things ran too fast. he has a real talent for striking that balance of keeping that pace quick, keeping it snappy, keeping you hooked and invested in every sentence, but making very good use of every word, every character, every detail. I don't know if it's just a natural talent or something he's practiced over the years, but I mean, it plays really well to that story. It plays well to all his stories, but in terms of like the modern romance kind of twist, for one, there's the fact that like, it's a modern romance that doesn't sit there and like uplift one lead at the expense of the other, which we see a lot nowadays. But it's also just the fact that it takes kind of modern conventions, some modern approaches, takes the idea of like these imperfect people, builds that drama between them, and does so in a way that is, as opposed to actually being kind of the slow burn that we usually see, or giving off that rushed feeling that we usually see, is a quick burn that leaves you feeling every moment. So
That's good.
I recommend it.
All right, I'll
Ultimately, that's what I'm trying to say. To like, even though we're the fantasy podcast here, to our readers, I recommend reading Josh Tatter, who was originally going to be our guest for this weekend, but had things changed. Obviously, read him for his fantasy, read him for his Western adventure fiction, but surprisingly, for the romance story that he wrote too, or is writing, I should say. But oh yeah, we're almost at 2 hours.
Yep. But I was also going to real quick comment that I still got to finish a few other stories I'm reading for other people, and the Lunar Awards stories. Yeah. So any reading of Mr. and Mrs. They Have Thoughts, we'll have to wait till after August, which is, well, between having to finish Varcola for the midway point, secure a visa, and conclude some of my courses, and conclude these Lunar Awards, and also finish on one other book besides Varcola. This is shaping to be a busy month, but
yes.
And also produce the audio drama, which is I posted earlier. This thing is such a time-consuming project. I finally understand Don Bluth, because Don told me there were days he'd skip meals, and like in his autobiography, he mentions he skipped meals sometimes in the production of certain animated stories. He'd go without sleep, sometimes 3 to 4 hours sleep on, I think it was the production of the Land Before Time. A part of him doesn't remember every detail of the production, because he just, you go months with no sleep, you don't remember everything. And this is a man with a prodigious memory. But then he mentioned it was Fievel and Land Before Time. He doesn't always remember every detail, because there was so much running around and so little sleep. And what ended up happening was Spielberg neglected his duties as director on these projects, and Don had to step in a few times to try to fill in the gap. And this just meant that Don had even more work. And but like, then you understand, how much work goes into production. And what Don had told me, like, when it came to like, it's like, so you barely slept during a lot of the production of these stories. Wait till you produce something, then you'll know what it's like. You have sleep's an option. Food is something you do as a hobby, and you just don't have the time for life. This is your life.
Yeah.
And everything else is optional. Food, drinks, spare time, dates. You don't have those. Those are for other people.
There's a similar thing I heard from a guy that worked for a chef that I know.
Mhm.
It was actually the chef who taught one of my good friends how to cook
Mhm.
years and years ago. He used to have a restaurant down here before he, I think about 5 years ago, he was forced to close it down for cost reasons. I believe the owner of the building started like trying to like increase the rent to the point that it was unsustainable. But one of his servers was a guy who had worked with him a few times before, and he also hopped to other restaurants, including restaurants that were owned by people that had no experience, didn't really understand the business, didn't understand the amount of investment. And the way I kind of look at it for like the people that really want to make a creative living work for them, and you know, cooking, being a chef, creating menus, creating like good food isn't just about like technical skill and consistency. There's that creative element too. I would argue it is a creative field. Um,
Yeah, it
his
is.
yeah, his how he put it is that like he had basically like confronted the owner of one of the places he used to work at one point because the dude was never there. And one of the days he was there, he kind of asked, was like, "Why don't you ever come into your business and like see how things are doing?" And the guy said, like, "I figured it would just run itself." And he told him, he was like, "Dude, like you hired me out because I've been in this industry for 25 years. I'm gonna tell you straight up. Are you married? Yes, I am. Well, she's your mistress now. Your wife is your mistress now. Your home is a place you visit. This place is your new wife. This place is your new home. If you can't treat it like that, it will never work." And sure enough, that place failed. Obviously, restauranting is a little bit different from other creative endeavors, but if you're trying to make something lasting like that, you're trying to make a career out of a creative field, like whether it is writing, videography, animation, illustration, painting, any of these things, it's gonna demand a lot of time, a lot of your time if that's what you want to be your primary thing. And even if you don't want it to be your primary thing and are just passionate enough to approach it from many different angles, and doubly so if you want both of those things. Yeah, the Don Bluth's description there too. Sleep is an option. Food becomes a hobby. Yeah, your time is going to get devoured by those things, which can be
Mm.
very daunting for a lot of people. And a lot of people, I think that's the reason, particularly among writers. I'm sure you've experienced this, having worked as a teacher yourself and all this stuff, where you hear lots of people talk about, "Oh, I want to write a book. Oh, I've always
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to do this. I've always wanted to write a novel. I've always wanted to like write this, write that, write that." And you get lots of talk and little action because once they start trying to do it, it
It's hard.
finally sinks in. Yeah, no, this isn't just all fun and games. It's not just like la da 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 da. I feel inspired today. Typey typey type. No, you're gonna have to write when you don't feel inspired. You're gonna have to keep working at it after the first draft is written. You're gonna have to revisit
Mm.
it again and again and again to fine tune it and make it. It's work. It's work,
It
and
is.
it takes a lot of time.
It takes boatloads of time, and it
Yep.
like how do I put it? Not it takes a drive,
Yes.
and that's actually the center of a podcast I did with the other day with Delinquent Academic at around 7 p.m. EST.
I
So
saw you guys recording that the other night. Yeah, because I'm
yeah,
used to.
well, that's part one. There's going to be a part two down the road.
Mhm.
But part of what was discussed was what does it take, and that no matter what, and I even said I feel really bad for those who can't make it in the as a writer, whatnot, and who don't succeed. But in it, we said it takes drive and a kind of obsession, and the sort of drive that Napoleon had, or Julius Caesar,
Yeah.
or something. Or Beethoven. Beethoven's someone who was obsessive. He couldn't just go down and have a 9 to 5 job. It would get in the way of the piano. And but when you read up about Beethoven, he genuinely wanted to be a more ordinary person. He couldn't. And it's a tragedy in a way. That, like he was brilliant, but he was also tragic in a weird way. And you kind of need that drive, that obsession. And most people don't have it. And the people who say, well, I would love to do that someday. What I end up usually telling them is, then just do it, or just don't. And
The question I often ask is, well, what are you waiting for?
Yeah, and there's
You
something
really want to do it so badly. Why haven't you started?
Now, Christopher Lee, when he was at the top of his career at one point, well, he had many top of his career moments because he was brilliant. But Christopher Lee was asked at one point, "Oh, I'd love to be an actor. What's your best advice?" Christopher Lee actually said, "Don't. Just don't." And he said, because it's a thankless job and the odds of success are low, and there's never been more competition for every role. Every role.
Yep.
And what he then said was, I think he was like, I'm 80 at the time, and he's like, I still have to audition a lot of the time. He's like, you think I just get handed every role? I don't. And like Christopher Lee was like, and this is a creative industry, and there are those who can last for 5 years just doing the same thing, but like you can't. You have him creatively, you also will likely burn out. And like he's like, so don't do it. You have him, but if you have to, then make sure you're willing to work as a janitor for a theater company. Make sure you're willing to polish the shoes of other actors. Make sure you're willing to do all the little jobs first as your side gig in order to finance yourself and feed yourself while you're going for an acting career. And here's the interesting thing when he said that in that interview, and he was asked, like, well, and he said, this is my advice to every actor. And he was asked, well, what about you? Did you have to do that? And he said, yes, I worked every job. And he's like, I worked every job. I was the janitor. I cleaned the laundry. I served the food. I did all that. And he's like, you think I just achieved success instantly? My breakout stuff was with Hammer. Like, he's like, and that took, it took him 10 years to get his first Hammer gig. You know what I mean? Like, He's like, I wasn't a breakout success. I was the guy running errands. Like, he's like, I didn't just get the roles handed to me. And even after I started doing well with Hammer, I still had to do some of the side stuff and help out because it was such a small production. So, and like, that's the thing. Like, with writing, you're going to have to do some odd jobs to make ends meet. And, like, I recently met someone who had instant breakaway success for the most part with a trad pub, but that's extremely rare. You're not likely to get that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'll be honest. I recently had a bit of a reunion with, I went back to the Indie Geek stream, and I even admitted, I burnt out on YouTube. So I had to take some months off from YouTube. And I'm trying to get back in the routine of attending those streams just because I remember them being fun and I could listen to them while I do other things. And, like, everyone was like, yeah, we were just kind of wondering what happened to you. And it's like, nah, I went on Substack and I've been doing a lot of other projects and I couldn't do the YouTube thing for a long time. And even now, like, when I do YouTube, it's just this hodgepodge podcast stuff or casual conversations and movie talk. But like, but now the first determined project I have is with the radio drama, which I know at the end of August, I'm going to be pitching that to actual radio houses and radio stations and hoping they pick it up. It's not going to give money because they don't pay for that. But it'll get the name out there. It'll get the brand out there. And but this, just to go back to the original talk of nations and borders and whatnot, I'm not going to really be paying attention to borders because I'm going to be pitching it hopefully to US radio stations, Australian, New Zealand, or what my brother calls is, what is he called, New Zealand? He had a funny joke about it. He said, yeah, you already mentioned Australia. And it's like, I think he said, like, aren't they just like Australia's Subway restaurant, or like their McDonald's? Like, they're just the side restaurant they visit on occasion. He just always picks on the Kiwis. He really likes New Zealand TV series and like Hercules Legendary Journeys, some of the Lord of the Rings themes. He's just like, but we have to pick on the Kiwis because they're so small compared to Canada, Australia, even England, America. Like, you have to pick on them because it's the only small English nation. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and you have, what did he once say? Are they even a nation? I thought they were just a concept. Like, and yeah, I've met a few Kiwis, and that always gets them a little fired up and annoyed because some of them don't. Some of them are amused. Delinquent academic's probably gonna laugh when he hears this. Just Dan's little jokes. But
yeah, DA's good spirited like that.
Yeah, and like, yeah, but anyways, we went through all these different topics, so I'll just say to end it, don't forget to check out Dave's Substack, and hopefully he'll win the Lunar Awards. I can't actually give that to him because I have to read the stories first.
Yeah.
All 31 stories.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I'd offer to help you read some of them, but considering that I entered, a bit of a conflict of interest.
Yeah, and I probably would have submitted something and would have been fair, but I didn't have the time to write something for the awards, so I didn't apply, and I'm a judge, so there's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And even if I was like, well, I'm not going to even choose mine, I didn't have the time. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
Like, I'll be honest, I forgot about the Lunar Awards until a week ago when Winston messaged me and said, hey, you're gonna have to read all the stories. What stories? He's like, you're the judge. Oh, shh. You kind of go, oh, shh.
Yep.
But like, actually, he's someone we should probably try to get on the show at some point.
Definitely.
I have so many questions.
Yeah, Winston Malone, Brian Rindell would both be good people to get on here because Brian used to. He might actually still also partly host the Lunar Awards as well.
I don't know. Like, I think Winston told me.
Know.
I forgot. It's in my messages somewhere what he's up to.
Yeah, I mean, he's still around. I still see him from time to time on Substack, but
okay. I know Winston's terribly busy because he's now got his awesome looking bookshop. I almost squealed like a little girl when I saw it in that one video. It was just
very, very cool, living the dream kind of thing. And like I said it to him on notes yesterday, and Winston, I say it again to you here. I hope that ends up being a massive success.
Same. It looks so cool. It looks like the sort of bookstore I'd love to visit. It's also a lot bigger than I thought it was. In my head, like, it looks so cool. That's the sort of bookstore I want. But I don't have the money.
Yeah.
So that's where I'll just encourage everyone to not only subscribe to both Man Behind the Screen and Bros Grin, but to also, pay in, that guys, because it'll go to publishing books and whatnot. But even if you can't, your subscription is just always appreciated, and your readership very much appreciated, except for Feastos, because like, we don't need them. I'm joking. Feasto I love, there's a show I want to get back on, Black Abyss, just so I can clown with him.
Yeah.
He's so much fun. Maybe I'll just link him to this when I post it next week on Saturday, because we're recording.
No
also.
reason not to.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll just go, well, you'll get yours when you're back on the show. You'll get yours. But yeah, but shout out to him, because he's just so tenderhearted and kind, but also funny. And he puts up with a lot from a lot of retards out there. So take care, everyone. Remember to sub to Dave, because he's awesome. And next week or the week after, we'll get a guest on, and the chat will be more between a three-way conversation and whatnot, which is always pretty cool. So toodles.
Have a